Yeah, this is the monster I know. This is who I grew up with. This is what he looked like, just a little bit shorter hair. And no life in his eyes. You can tell there's nothing behind his eyes. There's no soul, not a care, only for self. I dealt with mental, physical, psychological, every abuse that an adult can put on a child, I dealt with from him alone. And it's almost like I can see the proudness, kind of, he's proud of what he did, almost. I can almost see that look in his eyes he used to get when he would come into my room. It's just disgusting. Just trash, garbage of the earth.
What was your reaction when I reached out to you?
My reaction when you reached out was, why didn't this happen sooner? You know, maybe 3 people would have been saved. I believe that everybody that came in contact with him knew that he was about control. He's just an evil person. He's the devil. I have so many mixed feelings about this picture. This was the building we lived in. My life before Robert, I would say, was a regular textbook family. All 3 of us, me, my mom, and my sister, were always super close. I was old enough to understand that my dad, who was in the Air Force, was out of the country, and he had been gone for a while, and she was lonely. I'm sure she was lonely until Robert came in the picture, and things took a big turn. This is a picture of my mom and Robert soon after they started dating. My mom met him. She went out with one of our neighbors to the local officers club, the NCO club on base. When I found this picture, even my mom doesn't look happy in this picture. I feel during the time my dad was gone, my mom really didn't know what to do. This was her first time with 2 little kids on her own. And I think that she just thought it'd be easier if she had somebody else to help her with everything. The first time I met Robert, I was 7, getting ready to have my 8th birthday. It was kind of exciting at first. This was the Robert that we had in his off time, when he wasn't thinking he was playing G.I. Joe, Rambo in the Air Force. He worked in the military police. He was a big guy. He always seemed so big to me. And he always had his camis on and his camouflage hat with a beer and a koozie. That was his outside of work uniform, always. We initially thought it was a cool idea if he would have really been that way, you know? I'd say that wore off within the first 6 months. I would say their relationship moved rather quickly. He would just come on the weekends or, a couple days. But when he started being there all the time, it was so overwhelming for me. So overwhelming. He had set up a target in our basement, and he would shoot our Barbies that we no longer played with, or dolls we didn't play with anymore. He had a blast doing that, which I thought was very, very weird. In our basement, he had a seat on the couch that was just where he sat. We had a coffee table that all his guns and all his cleaning products to clean them were always right there. He didn't need to have guns. And I think that was his backbone. It was more of him showing the power behind them and what he had, honestly. I had never been around that, so it was kind of scary to me. One day, I come in, open the door, drop my stuff, and run to the bathroom. And right before I could pull my pants down, the shower curtain flies open. And he's standing there with a gas mask and a machete. He thought it was the funniest thing that I peed my pants. I felt like I was on eggshells all the time. I didn't know what was gonna happen. He just kind of took over, and my mom let him. Like, I guess the man's supposed to control the house, so that's how she felt about it. I just wanted to not worry and not be anxious all the time and just be a kid. I just did not trust him. I was always waiting for something to happen, and I guess now we really have to follow his rules. Whenever we asked for something, he would have us drop and do push-ups for whatever we wanted. You want to go roller skating? 30 push-ups. It started being whatever we asked, we had to do push-ups. So, yeah, I quit asking for anything. Because there would be any time he would just be like, give me 20 push-ups, or, just sitting there, and he'd tell us to count them off. It was all him establishing dominance over me. He was taking control and seeing what he could get away with. Robert, along with many other things, implemented that I wash dishes now. I was 8 years old, couldn't even reach in the sink yet. And there was a time where I had did the dishes the night before, and Robert came and woke me up from bed. It wasn't time to get up for school yet. He pointed out a plate that still had crusty stuff on it and told me that I was to hold the plate to the wall with my nose until he told me I was done. He told me if I dropped that plate, I would pay for it. The whole time I'm just sitting there thinking, like, what's next? And just trying not to cry because there was nothing I could do about it. Absolutely nothing. It was my life. I'm just thinking, like, what is the point of this? The anxiety and the fear and everything that I was already feeling, I felt was enough punishment. I must have been standing there 30, 45 minutes. And he finally said I could move.
Okay, that's enough.
This is a picture of my sister and I with my puppy Buster that I had received on my birthday. When I got Buster, he was mine and nobody could take him from me, not even Robert. My mom gave him to me and he was mine, you know? But when Robert came home and found Buster, he was mad. He voices his anger and he wasn't gonna do anything for him. It was me and my mom's job to take care of him. And we did. I was running all over the house looking for him.
Buster?
Like, where's Buster?
Buster?
I already had all these things in my mind. Like, did Robert do something to him? He didn't like him from the beginning, so what's stopping him from doing it? And Robert's just sitting on the couch. He just blatant, like he was so proud of himself, was like, if you really want to know what I did to Buster, I broke his neck and threw him in the garbage. And I just ran up to my room. I cried the whole night. I was so messed up at that time. I just didn't even know what to do. I didn't know who to talk to. I'm like, this is not good. And that was always in my head, always in my head. If somebody could kill a dog, they could definitely kill a person. And I didn't know if that was gonna be me. This was our baby Rocky. Right before he went and got Rocky is when he told me what he did to Buster. It was just like a couple months before that. And I thought, well, maybe he's trying to make it right. He was such a good dog, though. But just like everything else, Robert had to tear it away from us because he couldn't control him. I remember the day that he broke his 4x4 run. Robert ran over there and took him by his chain that he was dragging and flung him around like a helicopter in the air. It was terrifying to hear the noises coming out of Rocky and to see a human being doing that. And he had to shoot him 5 times because he just wouldn't die. I want to know why he ever kept getting dogs. You know you're just going to take them away from us. Why even do that? Why? Was that fulfilling your need of killing something? The day he did that, I wouldn't even look at Robert. I just kept staring at my mom, just like, are you going to open your mouth? Why is this okay? Hello, lady. You know, do you see what's happening here? And I just kept looking at her like, and just no response, nothing. And I just think she was afraid if she would have said something. He controlled all of us. He did it because he wanted to, and he got a thrill from it. And after Rocky was killed, I definitely had the thought in my head that nobody's safe. He wore the belt to work every day. That seemed to be his go-to, you know? Well, you can always get the belt, you know? The one time I got the belt, that was the first time I didn't make it home before the streetlights came on. I was actually like 30 minutes late. I had marks for days, thick leather marks for days. And that was just for coming home late. He had no problem whooping me. And that's when the paddle, my cutting board, came into play. I was like so excited because I made her a cutting board because I cut it out myself and I'd sanded it for weeks and put the finish on it. And I was so excited to give it to her. And I came home and handed it to her and Robert grabbed it. And he said, you know, this would be perfect for a paddle. And like my heart dropped. I was so disappointed. Because I knew he was gonna do what he was saying, you know, and he went and cut the sides off. I was crying. I was also crying because I seen what he made with it. And I knew that was not gonna be anything nice. So it always became a choice between the paddle that he made out of my cutting board or his military belt, which was like thick leather. And I had already felt that, so I thought maybe the paddle would be better. I always chose the paddle. I don't know why, but I did. It was a big deal to me because then he took what I made and used it against me. And that's when he started the whoopings. It was a part of the grooming. I believe he was trying to see what he could do, what he could just push the limit far enough. My mom won't say anything. He could get away with it. And it was just always just a little bit more each time. He would ask me to rub his back. So, you know, I'd have to go around on the couch and rub his back, which was fine because my mom was right there and we were on the couch. But then it started escalating to he'd lay in the bed and he would just have a towel over his butt. We'd get up to get ready for school and he would just say, hey, I need my back massaged. And normally it would be after my mom already left for work. So she wouldn't really know until she got home and she's like, why aren't you at school? But even then, I don't think she questioned him. I don't understand why my mom thinks this is normal, you know? But nobody wanted to anger the bear. Nobody wanted to see what would happen if they said no. When I was sleeping, all of a sudden, I would just be woke up to him up my shirt or down my pants and just the smell of beer. But he would come in there it was a lot. I try to make myself, I started layering. I would wear like 4 tank tops and then a shirt. You know what I'm like? If he can't get through all the layers, he can't touch me, was my thinking then. but I'd also normally cry myself to sleep because I couldn't believe I was having to go through that. I finally was able to tell my mom about it. She said she talked to him, and it stopped for a minute, and I'm like, wow, thanks for talking to him, Mom. But then it started back up again. And there was one opportunity where I told her, well, he's doing it again. And she's like, what? And I said, what do you want me to do? Like, I would really like to just be a kid. And she's like, well, why don't we just pick up a lock? And we bought one of them slide chain locks. I couldn't wait to go to bed and lock the door because I was gonna sleep that night. You know, I was excited. I'm not gonna be bothered. I get to sleep. My mom did something. And I woke up immediately as soon as I heard that doorknob. He tried it, and he couldn't get in. And then I could hear him with my mom, like, what did you do? What did you do? I'm just laying there just thinking, like, is that the conversation we're having right now? I guess, you know. But I'm safe. He didn't get in here tonight. I believe at the time when my mom put the lock on the door, she was brave enough to finally tell him to get out. Was finally stepping up for herself. Sometimes I just wonder if she even had a clue what to do. One day, I just noticed like it was a big gash in her back. And then like a mark over it, and it was big, you know? And I'm like, what happened to your back? And she's like, oh, I fell into the bedside table. Even at that age, I was telling her there's no excuse for him to put his hands on you. You know, it's bad enough, like the mind control and everything, and now he's touching, putting his hands on you. No. I feel it goes back to the grooming, the predatory behavior, seeking out people that you can manipulate and control. And I think that most narcissists, they go for people. They see people, they notice people that they can influence and engage in and control. They pick up on that so easily, and I think he probably picked up on that. My mom was so small and petite compared to him, and I think he took advantage of that. He knew that he could control her. I would ask her, why can't we just leave? Because she was always afraid of him. So if you can't make him leave, why can't we leave? I know that there had to be brainwashing, and it was just fear. But then I did start thinking about what he might be doing to her. We were sitting watching TV one day after school, and he was cleaning his guns like he normally did. My mom was cooking dinner, so she really was oblivious to anything that was happening. And he pulled the gun on me. He said, I could just shoot you right now. And what would you do?
Hey.
And I just kind of stared at him. I was stunned, and I didn't really know how to respond. I'm sure my face probably said it all, and I think that gave him the gratification he wanted. And he just started going back into cleaning it again, like nothing just happened. And that was the first time that it happened where he actually pointed the gun at me. We were at my cousin's house visiting. We were in Robert's parents' conversion van, and my mom had to run up to the corner store.
I'll be right back, okay?
And then he turns around and started arguing with me with something that I don't remember what we were arguing about, but he was like, you know, I could just kill you. And just pulled his gun out from under the seat and just held it to my head. I always remember his expression. I always remember his face. He was very straight-faced and very serious. And I knew it, but I just didn't care anymore. And then, I see my mom in the rearview mirror walking up, and I thought I'd probably be better off if he just pulled it. Then I wouldn't have to deal with it anymore. None of the bull, none of it. Not worrying about what's gonna happen to me, what he's gonna do, or, then maybe he'll get in trouble. I was like, just do it. Just do it. You'll have a lot to explain to my mom. Just pull it. He intended to shoot me that day. Something just happened and I was done. And I wasn't gonna let him do his dumb he had been doing to me for all them years, and I was gonna talk back and fight back. And he slid it back on the seat. And I think about that all the time. What if he would have did it? Cyclist charged in fatal I-270 crash. A Columbus man is charged with drunken driving after a passenger on his motorcycle died as a result of injuries he sustained in an accident. The driver of the motorcycle, Robert Cordell, 32, was driving at a high rate of speed and lost control of the motorcycle. Both men had been drinking at the time, and the investigation continues. This was an accident that my mom had actually been waiting to happen because he told her he had planned this. Their marriage was dissolving, so things started, taking different turns, meeting different people he wanted to bring around. Robert started having an affair with his friend's wife. He would brag to my mom that he was gonna take care of him, get him out of the picture, and did exactly like he told her. He was gonna get him as drunk as he could. He was gonna put him on the back of his bike, and he was gonna drive as fast as he could till he flew off. And that's exactly what he did. When we seen it on the news and in the paper, her jaw dropped when we seen it, and he actually did it. I don't know why she would ever think he wouldn't. I mean, he was pretty good with following through with threats. It was heartbreaking that his family did not know how evil Robert was and actually fought for him not to do jail time. They won. He did no jail time for this. I believe that he murdered his best friend. It's just the lowest of the low. I'm sure there was fear and despair. My mom just really couldn't handle it, and she was over it. And I think she needed that. She just was fed up, and she gained her footing. My mom finally had the courage to leave. I was happy that she was divorcing him, just making him go. And she made him go. We didn't leave. She made him go. At least when he wasn't there, I could breathe. I felt like I could breathe. I could fully expand my lungs and I could breathe. The day she went to court, I told her to come pick me up from school early, and we went out and celebrated. But she was scared. She was so scared then. And I think she was afraid of him stalking, which he did. Robert kept calling over and over again and leaving messages on the answer machine that he was on his way over there to kill her. And he was gonna do to her like he did to his friend. And we all know how that turned out, is what he said. It was just constant. He was calling back to back, to back, to back, and just kept leaving messages. I believe he was very capable of following through with every threat. Probably wouldn't have a second thought about killing me or my mom. Wouldn't even bother them. When he was gone, I would still feel the anxiousness. I think that I won't truly feel like calm in my heart until he's dead, until I know he's gone. Around 2002, we had just moved. My mom was in a new place, and we're settling, and the phone rings, and it's a lawyer. And she asked what it's referring to, and they said Robert Cordell. And I'm like, what? And I guess he was explaining to her what happened.
Prosecutors say Cordell shot and killed his neighbor, former Reading Mayor Frank Carnavelli, his ex-wife Rita Bushman, and Cordell's former sister-in-law, Kathy Cordell.
Yesterday afternoon, police say he had blood on his boots and eventually admitted killing his neighbors, and then told police his sister-in-law was also dead inside the home.
None of us were surprised. It blew our mind that he did that, but we weren't surprised. He's 100% a monster and a predator and a killer.
Victim's family was also in court to face the man they say turned on friends.
Just came over and killed my brother and his wife for no reason.
It just don't make sense why somebody would hurt somebody that did so much for him.
I learned that he strangled his sister-in-law. And I can't believe he was in the house with her for a day or two. And went next door and confronted the neighbor about wanting his vehicle back, and proceeded to shoot him 12 times. And when his ex-wife came to check out what happened, he shot her. It wasn't unexpected. We 100% thought we'd see something else sooner than this. I just think about his sister-in-law. He had to stare her in the eyes while he was doing this. That's very personal, to strangle somebody. Honestly, I None of us would have been surprised if there was other victims. There's probably other victims. People that he took advantage of didn't have people. You know, the grooming mentality of trying to be around people that didn't have anybody protect them, look out for them. And I think about that a lot too, because I think, you know, anytime he came in my room, he could have just decided to get rid of me too. I knew too much, you know, I could get him in trouble. And then it just makes me think of the guns to my head, and he could have killed me 2 times then. He actually looks very small. He looks like he's defeated. And I like that. He needs to be defeated. He needs to be brought down to the level he belongs, which is under my feet. And that's the first time he looks like that. I believe he should have been given the death penalty, and I would have loved to seen that day. I don't think that taxpayers should pay for him to breathe and to eat and to live. He's a waste of space. I would actually like, when he dies, can they send me a video of him being pushed into the oven? I am so serious. That would be the best closure for a lot of people. My mom was diagnosed with lung cancer in the summer of 2018. And even though she went through treatment and was doing well, it still took her life in 2020 during COVID. If my mom was here for this, I believe that she would be very supportive. And I think she'd probably be proud of me. It's kind of like the end of the chapter, closing the book. I wish she would have had the strength to leave earlier. I wish she would have known what to do. I think just at her age and in the life she lived, she really didn't know her options, and she didn't have anybody to talk to about that either. And she just picked what she thought was the best route for her. And as much as I paid for her being with him, she paid. I've closed my book on all the trauma. I've worked through the trauma. It's just made me the person I am today. I don't deal with anybody's bull. I'm always the one to stand up. If I wouldn't have lived the life I lived with him, I probably would have been a different person. My experiences have made me who I am today. I'm not gonna thank him for that. He should die for that. But I am the person I am. Everything has built me up to this.
What would you say to Robert if you were sitting in the same room with him today?
I would say, if I seen Robert today, you didn't get me. I won. I'm still here. I'm walking this earth. I'm breathing this air free. And I'm not only free to do it, I'm free from you to do it. And I'm good, and I made a life. And I didn't let anything you do take that from me. Anything you did, I still did everything. Just made me do it better. I could have went down his path and ended up crazy and let everything that affected me drive me crazy and do crazy things. But it's my mind. So I chose that I was gonna heal from it. And I wasn't gonna let it break me like it did when I was that age. I've done pretty good.
Sean Bell should have been thinking about wedding vows. Instead, before the first light of dawn touched the rooftops of Queens, he found himself trapped inside a silver Nissan Altima as an explosion of gunfire shattered the silence of a November morning. The neighborhood would later remember the sound before anything else. One shot. Then another. Then so many that counting became impossible. Windows trembled inside nearby apartment buildings. People woke believing fireworks had erupted in the middle of autumn. Others instinctively dropped to their bedroom floors, convinced rival gangs had begun another street battle. The echoes bounced between brick buildings and parked cars, rolling through Jamaica, Queens, in violent waves before fading into a silence that somehow felt even louder. When it was finally over, 50 bullets had been fired in less than a minute. A young father lay dying behind the steering wheel. His closest friends bled beside him. No handgun rested beneath the seats. No rifle had been thrown into the bushes. No weapon was found anywhere inside the vehicle. Only broken glass, twisted metal, pools of blood, and a future that had vanished before sunrise. Hours later, a church that had been decorated for celebration waited for a groom who would never arrive. A white wedding dress remained untouched. Flowers carefully arranged the day before slowly began to wilt. Guests who had prepared to witness promises of forever instead gathered in disbelief, whispering questions no one could answer. How could a bachelor party become a funeral? How could a man preparing to say "I do" become another name engraved into America's long and painful history of police violence? And perhaps the question that refused to disappear. How could 50 bullets be fired at 3 unarmed men? The answers would become buried beneath investigations, courtroom testimony, contradictory memories, political arguments, and years of public outrage. Every witness seemed to remember something different. Every officer believed he had acted to save lives. Every member of Sean Bell's family believed something had gone unimaginably wrong. The truth, like the smoke that drifted away from the crime scene, became increasingly difficult to grasp. To understand that night, however, requires leaving behind the headlines. Because headlines simplify tragedy. They reduce entire lives into a few unforgettable numbers. 23 years old. 50 shots. 3 officers. No gun. But real life is never measured only by statistics. It exists in quiet moments that newspapers rarely mention. It exists in children asleep in their beds, unaware that everything they know is about to change. It exists in a fiancé rehearsing wedding vows one final time. It exists in a father imagining the smile he would see when church doors opened. It exists in ordinary conversations that unknowingly become the final conversations. Sean Bell did not wake on November 25 expecting to become the center of national debate. He expected to become a husband. That distinction matters. Because history often remembers victims only from the moment they die. Their final minutes become larger than every year they spent living. Their names become symbols. Their personalities disappear. Yet Sean Bell had dreams that had nothing to do with politics. He worried about paying bills. He worried about providing for his daughters. He laughed with friends. He argued with family members over ordinary things. He rushed through workdays hoping life would eventually become a little easier. Like millions of young fathers across America, he believed tomorrow would offer another chance to build something better. Tomorrow simply never came. The city surrounding him carried its own complicated history. New York had changed dramatically since the violent decades of the 1970s and 1980s. Crime rates had fallen. Tourists returned. Neighborhoods once feared had begun transforming into places where families could once again imagine stable futures. Police leaders celebrated aggressive tactics as proof that tougher enforcement saved lives. Many residents agreed. Many others quietly wondered what those victories had cost. In communities of color, especially across parts of Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens, encounters with police often carried an invisible tension. Parents taught children lessons that had nothing to do with mathematics or reading. Keep your hands visible. Stay calm. Don't argue. Don't make sudden movements. Hope the officer sees you as a person before seeing you as a threat. Those conversations passed from one generation to another, usually behind closed doors, rarely discussed outside the family. Most Americans never heard them. For others, they were simply part of growing up. By 2006, memories of earlier controversies involving New York police had not disappeared. Names remained etched into public memory. Communities still carried scars. Trust, once broken, rarely returns quickly. Against that backdrop, another undercover operation unfolded on an ordinary November night outside a nightclub that had already attracted police attention. Officers believed they were preventing violence. Young men believed they were finishing an evening with friends. Neither group imagined history waited only minutes away. Everything that followed unfolded in seconds. Understanding it would take years. The investigation produced thousands of pages of reports. Attorneys argued over split-second decisions. Experts reconstructed bullet trajectories. Journalists searched for overlooked details. Civil rights organizations demanded accountability. Police unions defended officers placed in impossible circumstances. Television debates transformed complex human tragedy into competing political narratives. Yet beneath every legal argument remained a family forced to relive unimaginable loss. For Nicole Portray Bell, time seemed to split into two separate lives. There was the future she had spent months planning. Then there was everything after the phone call. The seating arrangements. The flowers. The music. The photographs prepared for a wedding album. Every joyful detail suddenly became evidence of something stolen rather than something celebrated. Instead of choosing honeymoon destinations, she faced funeral arrangements. Instead of writing thank you cards, she answered reporters' questions. Instead of watching her daughters run toward their father, she began imagining how to explain death to children too young to understand permanence. Those intimate heartbreaks rarely appear inside official documents. Court transcripts record testimony. Medical reports record injuries. Ballistic analyses record trajectories. None of them record silence inside a family home after everyone leaves. None measure birthdays celebrated with an empty chair. None calculate how many times children ask when their father is coming home before accepting that he never will. That is the invisible side of tragedy. It continues long after television cameras disappear. As public attention shifted from one controversy to another, Sean Bell's family remained trapped inside a story that refused to end. Years passed. Courtrooms emptied. Politicians changed. Police commissioners retired. New protests emerged after different names dominated national headlines. Still, every anniversary returned the same memories. The same unanswered questions. The same photographs. The same unbearable realization that an ordinary evening had permanently altered countless lives. For the officers involved, the shooting also became an inescapable reality. Their names appeared across newspaper front pages. Their decisions faced relentless examination. Supporters viewed them as policemen forced into impossible circumstances where hesitation could have meant death. Critics viewed them as symbols of excessive force unleashed against unarmed black men. Few cases divide public opinion more deeply than those unfolding within seconds under conditions of fear, uncertainty, and imperfect information. Human beings instinctively search for certainty. Real life rarely provides it. Fear changes perception. Adrenaline distorts memory. Darkness hides details. Noise overwhelms reason. One mistaken assumption can begin a chain reaction impossible to reverse. That uncomfortable truth lies at the center of the Sean Bell case. What did officers genuinely believe they faced? What actually happened inside those final chaotic moments? Could the tragedy have been prevented? Were there opportunities for restraint? Or had events already spiraled beyond anyone's ability to control? These questions continue to echo nearly 2 decades later because they extend far beyond one street in Queens. They challenge broader assumptions about policing, race, fear, accountability, and the fragile relationship between authority and public trust. They force uncomfortable conversations that many societies prefer postponing. Perhaps that explains why Sean Bell's name continues appearing whenever America confronts another controversial police shooting. His story never truly ended in 2006. It became part of a larger national conversation still unfolding today. But before investigations, before protests, before courtrooms, before television panels argued over policy and responsibility, there was simply a young man finishing one chapter of his life while preparing to begin another. He did not know cameras would someday display his photograph beside the words 50 shots. He did not know strangers around the world would debate decisions made during the last minute of his life. He did not know his daughters would grow up learning about their father through news archives, documentaries, and courtroom records. He only knew that sunrise would bring his wedding day. That simple expectation makes what happened next all the more heartbreaking. Because somewhere between celebration and catastrophe, between hope and unimaginable loss, between an ordinary drive home and one of the most controversial police shootings in modern American history, the future Sean Bell believed awaited him disappeared forever. And to understand how that future unraveled, we must begin long before the gunfire, long before the flashing police lights, and long before the streets of Queens became the center of a national reckoning. The story of Sean Bell did not begin on a cold November morning outside the Kahlua Cabaret. It began decades earlier, in a borough that has always lived between contradiction and possibility. Queens has often been described as one of the most diverse places on earth. Walk only a few city blocks, and languages change. Storefront signs shift from Spanish to Korean, from Bengali to Greek, from Haitian Creole to English. Families from every corner of the world built lives there, carrying dreams that often outweighed the money in their pockets. It was a borough where ambition and hardship existed side by side. Luxury homes stood only minutes away from neighborhoods where parents worked multiple jobs simply to keep the lights on. In the early 1980s, when Sean Bell entered the world, New York City was still fighting battles that seemed impossible to win. Violent crime dominated evening news broadcasts. The crack cocaine epidemic had devastated entire communities. Street gangs claimed neighborhoods. Police officers faced genuine dangers every day. At the same time, many minority communities viewed law enforcement with suspicion born from decades of difficult encounters, allegations of discrimination, and aggressive policing strategies. Both realities existed simultaneously. Neither erased the other. Children growing up in Queens learned very early that the city could reward determination while punishing a single mistake. Sean was one of countless young boys raised in that environment. His childhood was not defined by extraordinary privilege or overwhelming tragedy. Instead, it reflected the lives of many working-class families striving to create stability amid uncertainty. He attended neighborhood schools. He played outside with friends until streetlights signaled it was time to return home. Basketball courts became gathering places after school. Music drifted from passing cars during warm summer evenings. Weekend barbecues filled apartment courtyards with laughter, conversations, and the smell of grilled food. Life was ordinary in the best possible way. Like many young boys, Sean admired older teenagers who seemed confident, fearless, and independent. He imagined adulthood as a destination where problems became easier to solve. Reality, of course, proved far more complicated. As he entered adolescence, New York itself began changing. The city's homicide rate steadily declined. Mayor after mayor promised safer streets. Police adopted increasingly proactive enforcement strategies designed to prevent crime before it occurred rather than merely responding afterward. Many neighborhoods welcomed those changes. Parents appreciated safer parks. Businesses flourished. Subway stations once avoided after dark became busy again. Yet every improvement carried complicated consequences. Aggressive policing often concentrated in neighborhoods already struggling with poverty. Young black men found themselves stopped, questioned, and searched more frequently than many of their white counterparts. Some accepted these encounters as unfortunate but necessary. Others viewed them as humiliating reminders that suspicion often arrived before conversation. Sean experienced that same complicated reality. Friends later described him as someone who understood how quickly misunderstandings could escalate. He knew the unwritten rules many young black men quietly discussed among themselves. Stay respectful. Avoid sudden movements. Keep arguments short. Hope every encounter ends peacefully. Those lessons were never printed inside school textbooks. They passed from older relatives to younger generations through lived experience. As Sean matured, responsibility entered his life earlier than it does for many young adults. He became a father. The arrival of children changes people in ways outsiders rarely notice. Dreams become practical. Risk suddenly feels expensive. Late nights lose their appeal. Every paycheck acquires a purpose beyond personal comfort. Friends remembered Sean as someone who embraced fatherhood. He worked different jobs over the years, not because he loved every position, but because providing for his family mattered more than personal ambition. Construction. Odd jobs. Anything that helped pay rent and buy groceries. His schedule rarely followed perfect routines. Like many working-class fathers, he measured success not through luxury but through small victories. Bills paid on time. Food inside the refrigerator. Children smiling. Another month survived. Those achievements seldom attract attention. They are quiet triumphs repeated every day by millions of parents. Then there was Nicole. Friends often described their relationship as one built over years rather than moments. Like many couples, they experienced disagreements, financial stress, and the ordinary frustrations of adulthood. Real love rarely resembles movies. It grows through compromise. It survives difficult conversations. It learns patience. Sean and Nicole had already built a family together before planning their wedding. Their 2 daughters had become the center of their universe. Marriage, therefore, represented something deeper than romance. It symbolized permanence. Commitment. A public promise to strengthen the family they had already created. Planning a wedding while raising children and managing limited finances demanded sacrifice. Every decision involved budgeting. Every purchase required careful thought. Flowers cost money. Photography cost money. Formal clothing cost money. Even small decorations added unexpected expenses. Yet friends recalled genuine excitement surrounding the upcoming ceremony. The wedding represented hope. It represented progress. It represented the belief that difficult years had led toward something beautiful. No one planning that celebration imagined tragedy waiting only hours away. Meanwhile, another story unfolded across Queens without Sean ever realizing he had become part of it. The Kahlua Cabaret had attracted attention from the New York Police Department long before that November night. Investigators believed criminal activity occasionally surrounded the nightclub. Reports mentioned prostitution, illegal firearms, drug activity, violence. Whether every suspicion proved accurate mattered less than the perception formed within law enforcement. The location became a focus of undercover operations. Police assigned plainclothes officers to observe patrons without revealing their identities. Their mission reflected broader policing strategies common during that era. Blend into the environment. Watch carefully. Intervene before violence begins. From the officer's perspective, prevention could save lives. Success often meant stopping crimes before they happened. Failure sometimes meant arriving too late. Those responsibilities carried enormous pressure. Undercover work demanded constant vigilance. Every conversation might contain hidden meaning. Every movement could signal danger. Every hesitation might prove fatal. Officers trained themselves to recognize threats rapidly. Sometimes those instincts protected innocent people. Sometimes they contributed to catastrophic mistakes. Neither Sean Bell nor his friends spent much time thinking about undercover policing that autumn. They had entirely different priorities. Wedding preparations occupied conversations. Family responsibilities shaped daily routines. The bachelor party itself was hardly unusual. Friends wanted one final evening together before marriage. Laughter. Music. Stories that would someday embarrass the groom. It followed traditions repeated across countless cultures. One last celebration before entering a new chapter of life. No one entered the nightclub expecting history. November 24, 2006, arrived with the familiar rhythm of late autumn in New York. The air carried an unmistakable chill. Trees had surrendered most of their leaves. Holiday decorations gradually appeared inside shop windows as Thanksgiving weekend continued. Families gathered across the city. Shoppers searched for bargains. Others simply enjoyed rare time away from work. For Sean, however, the weekend revolved around something much more personal. Tomorrow would change everything. The wedding was finally here. Imagine his thoughts throughout that day. Did he mentally rehearse standing before family and friends? Did he picture Nicole walking down the aisle? Did he wonder whether everything would proceed according to plan? Those private reflections disappeared forever with him. We know only fragments reconstructed through memories shared by loved ones. Friends recalled excitement rather than anxiety. He appeared happy, relaxed, ready. Nothing suggested he sensed impending disaster. The bachelor party began as countless others have throughout history. Friends gathered. Conversations flowed easily. Music filled the room. People celebrated milestones, teased one another, laughed about old memories, and imagined future ones. Some danced. Others remained near the bar. The atmosphere reflected ordinary nightlife rather than impending catastrophe. Outside, undercover officers continued observing. They watched entrances, faces, interactions, movements. Most patrons never noticed them. That invisibility formed the foundation of undercover policing. Success depended upon remaining unnoticed. Yet invisibility also creates unique risks. If ordinary citizens cannot identify police officers, confusion becomes far more likely during rapidly unfolding situations. That reality would later become critically important. Inside the nightclub, Sean moved between groups of friends. He smiled. He talked. He embraced people who wished him well before the wedding. Those moments survived only through memory because no one realizes ordinary conversations become precious until they are impossible to repeat. Think about every farewell exchanged that evening. See you tomorrow. Congratulations. Drive safely. Enjoy your wedding. Simple phrases people speak without considering that they might become final words. Life often changes without warning. No dramatic music announces disaster. No narrator warns participants they have entered history. Everything appears painfully ordinary until one irreversible moment separates before from after. As midnight passed, the celebration gradually approached its conclusion. People prepared to leave. Some headed toward parking lots. Others searched for friends before departing. The streets outside appeared calm. Traffic remained light. Cold air replaced the warmth inside the nightclub. Somewhere nearby, undercover officers remained focused, interpreting behaviors through the lens of training and experience. Every glance, every conversation, every movement. When professionals expect danger, they naturally search for signs confirming those expectations. Psychologists describe this tendency as confirmation bias. It affects everyone. Doctors, pilots, judges, police officers, ordinary citizens. Human beings naturally notice information supporting existing beliefs more readily than information contradicting them. That psychological reality does not automatically explain what happened later. but it provides an important lens through which investigators, historians, and legal experts have continued examining the Sean Bell case. What someone believes they hear may differ from what another person actually said. What appears threatening from one perspective may appear completely innocent from another. Those differences become magnified during stressful situations. Especially at 4 o'clock in the morning. Especially outside a nightclub already associated with criminal investigations. Especially when everyone involved believes they are making reasonable decisions. None of the people leaving Kahlua Cabaret understood they were only minutes away from becoming participants in one of the most controversial police shootings in modern American history. Sean certainly did not. His attention remained fixed on home. On sleep. On tomorrow. On becoming a husband. That ordinary destination now feels almost unbearably tragic. He was not driving toward danger. He believed he was driving toward the happiest day of his life. The distance between those two futures measured only a few city blocks. Within minutes, assumptions would collide with fear. Training would collide with confusion. Celebration would collide with irreversible violence. And before the first rays of sunlight reached the streets of Queens, a single misunderstanding or perhaps several unfolding simultaneously would leave an entire nation asking whether the tragedy that followed could ever have been prevented. Long before television cameras broadcast his photograph across the country, before reporters repeated his name outside courtrooms, and before political leaders invoked his story during debates about policing and justice, Sean Bell was simply a son whose family believed he had the potential to build a life better than the one they had inherited. The people closest to him did not describe him as perfect. They described him as real. He could be stubborn. He could be impatient. Like many young men trying to balance work, family, friendships, and financial pressure, he sometimes carried the weight of adulthood with quiet frustration. But beneath those ordinary flaws was a man whose greatest source of pride was never material success. It was his family. Every parent measures life differently after children arrive. The future stops belonging only to you. Every decision echoes into someone else's tomorrow. For Sean, that transformation came while he was still remarkably young. By his early 20s, he was already raising 2 little girls. Many of his peers still worried about weekend plans, nightlife, or career ambitions. Sean's mornings often began with responsibilities that never appeared glamorous. Helping prepare breakfast. Checking whether there were enough groceries. Making sure bills had been paid. Trying to stretch every dollar a little farther than seemed possible. His daughters never fully understood those sacrifices. Children rarely do. To them, a father is simply supposed to appear. To fix broken toys. To carry them when they become tired. To laugh during bedtime stories. To make frightening things feel smaller. Sean embraced those ordinary moments. Friends remembered seeing his entire expression soften whenever his daughters entered the room. The confident young man joking with friends suddenly became a patient father kneeling to tie tiny shoelaces or lifting a sleepy child into his arms after a long day. There was nothing performative about it. No audience applauded. No cameras recorded those moments. They existed because love often reveals itself through repetition rather than grand gestures. Changing diapers. Holding little hands while crossing busy streets. Listening to endless questions children ask about the world. Those routines become invisible while they are happening. Only after someone is gone do people realize they represented an entire language of affection. Nicole understood that language better than anyone. Their relationship had grown through years of shared experiences rather than dramatic romance. Like countless couples trying to establish themselves financially, they encountered setbacks. Unexpected expenses interrupted carefully planned budgets. Arguments emerged over stress more often than over genuine disagreement. Sometimes exhaustion spoke louder than patience. Yet every challenge they overcame strengthened the belief that they belonged together. Marriage did not represent the beginning of their commitment. It represented public recognition of a commitment already tested by real life. Friends often noticed how naturally they functioned as parents. Responsibilities flowed between them without elaborate discussion. One prepared meals while the other watched the children. One handled errands while the other worked. It was not a perfect balance. Few families ever achieve one. But it worked because both believed they were building something larger than themselves. The wedding became symbolic of that shared journey. Months before the ceremony, conversations increasingly revolved around details. Guest lists expanded and contracted as budgets changed. Relatives offered opinions no one had requested. Friends volunteered to help. Children became excited without entirely understanding why everyone seemed so busy. Every family preparing for a wedding recognizes that mixture of joy and controlled chaos. Flowers needed ordering. Clothing required alterations. Schedules constantly shifted. Someone always remembered another forgotten detail. Through it all, Sean appeared eager rather than overwhelmed. Marriage was not something he viewed as an obligation. It was something he anticipated. He looked forward to introducing Nicole not merely as the mother of his children but as his wife. That distinction mattered deeply. People who knew him later recalled conversations about the future. He spoke about stability. About creating a better environment for his daughters. About continuing to work hard, even when jobs became physically exhausting. His dreams were strikingly ordinary. He did not imagine fame. He did not chase enormous wealth. He wanted security. A dependable home. Healthy children. A lasting marriage. Those aspirations rarely become newspaper headlines because they belong to millions of families. Yet they are precisely the dreams most devastatingly interrupted by unexpected tragedy. Sean also remained deeply connected to his friends. Many friendships stretched back years, surviving changing jobs, new relationships, and adult responsibilities. As happens with many young men, conversations often blended humor with quiet loyalty. Friends teased one another relentlessly. They celebrated milestones together. When someone struggled financially, others tried to help however they could. The bachelor party reflected those relationships. It was less about reckless celebration than shared history. A final evening marking the transition from one chapter into another. Joseph Guzman was among those closest to Sean. Their friendship had developed through years of trust. They understood one another without requiring lengthy explanations. Trent Benefield shared similar bonds. Together they represented more than companions for a night out. They represented witnesses to one another's lives. Friends who remembered youthful mistakes, personal growth, painful disappointments, and hopeful beginnings. The decision to spend the evening together seemed entirely natural. No one viewed it as extraordinary. No one imagined investigators would someday analyze every minute they spent together. The world often rewrites ordinary evenings after tragedy occurs. People search for hidden warnings. Missed opportunities. Suspicious behavior. Reality usually proves much simpler. Most tragic days begin exactly like ordinary ones. Sean woke on November 24th with plans rather than fears. He had errands to complete. People to see. A wedding only hours away. His mind likely drifted toward tomorrow's ceremony far more often than toward the night celebration. Bachelor parties eventually end. Marriage, everyone hopes, lasts forever. Even his clothing reflected anticipation rather than confrontation. There was nothing about his appearance suggesting someone preparing for violence. He expected photographs. Laughter. Family gatherings. His daughters watching proudly as their parents stood together before relatives and friends. Nicole spent those same hours completing countless final preparations. Every bride understands the strange emotional mixture accompanying the final day before marriage. Excitement competes with nervousness. Small imperfections suddenly feel enormous. Will everyone arrive on time? Will the weather cooperate? Will everything unfold as imagined? Beneath those ordinary anxieties lived genuine happiness. Years later, interviews revealed how completely unimaginable the coming tragedy had been. The possibility simply never entered her thoughts. Why would it? Thousands of weddings occurred across New York every year. Bachelor parties ended peacefully every weekend. Young couples built futures every day. There was no reason to suspect their story would become different. Elsewhere, Sean's parents also looked forward to the ceremony. Parents experience weddings differently than children. They remember scraped knees, school photographs, teenage rebellions, the awkward years. Watching a son marry often feels like witnessing childhood finally disappear. Pride mixes with nostalgia. Memories return unexpectedly. The little boy who once needed help crossing the street now prepares to guide a family of his own. That emotional transition awaited Sean's family. Instead, another unbearable journey would replace it. As evening approached, excitement gradually replaced routine. Friends called to confirm meeting times. Family members finalized schedules. Phones rang repeatedly. Life moved with the familiar urgency surrounding important celebrations. Sean left home believing he would return after spending a few hours enjoying the company of friends. Nicole expected to see him again before the ceremony. Perhaps they exchanged ordinary words before he left. Drive safely. Don't stay too late. See you in the morning. Such simple conversations become heartbreaking when viewed through hindsight. No one records them. No one imagines they might become final farewells. The value of ordinary moments reveals itself only after they disappear forever. As darkness settled across Queens, traffic lights reflected against damp pavement left by the cold November air. Neighborhood restaurants remained busy. Families finished late dinners. Children slept peacefully inside nearby apartments. For most residents, the night unfolded without significance. Life continued according to familiar rhythms. Inside Sean's world, anticipation quietly grew. His closest friends wanted to celebrate him. Not because marriage marked the end of freedom, as popular jokes often suggest, but because it represented the beginning of something worth honoring. The evening promised stories they would laugh about years later. Memories to revisit during anniversaries. Perhaps one day they would embarrass Sean by recounting bachelor party moments to his daughters. That future now exists only in imagination. One detail often overlooked amid discussions of the shooting is how profoundly normal Sean's final day actually was. There were no dramatic confrontations. No desperate escapes. No obvious signs of impending catastrophe. He was not hiding from anyone. He was not attempting to disappear. He remained surrounded by people who loved him, preparing for an event celebrated across every culture. That normality deepens the tragedy. Violence often feels easier to understand when preceded by visible warning signs. This case offers almost none. Instead, it presents an ordinary young father approaching one of life's happiest milestones. The contrast between expectation and reality could hardly be more severe. Hours separated wedding vows from gunfire. Flowers from forensic investigators. Family photographs from crime scene evidence. Celebration from mourning. Somewhere inside that narrow stretch of time, countless futures vanished simultaneously. Sean would never watch his daughters graduate. He would never celebrate wedding anniversaries. He would never grow older alongside Nicole. His daughters would never experience asking their father for driving lessons, relationship advice, or help moving into their first apartments. Those invisible losses remain impossible to calculate. Every homicide steals not only a life but every ordinary moment that life would have contained. For Sean Bell, those stolen moments were especially painful because they stood so close to fulfillment. His future appeared tangible, reachable, almost within his grasp. The tuxedo was ready. The guests were waiting. The church had been prepared. A family stood on the edge of beginning its next chapter. Neither Sean nor anyone who loved him realized that another group of people, operating under an entirely different understanding of the same night, had already begun making decisions that would intersect with his life in ways none of them could have imagined. Before dawn arrived, those two separate worlds would collide outside the Kahlua Cabaret. One was driven by celebration. The other by suspicion. Neither side believed they were moving toward tragedy. Yet within only a matter of minutes, the ordinary dreams of a 23-year-old father would become the center of one of the most painful and enduring questions in modern American history. The music inside the Kahlua Cabaret gradually lost its grip on the night as the hours slipped toward dawn. For most people inside the club, the celebration was winding down in the familiar way late-night gatherings always do. Conversations grew quieter. Some guests finished their drinks while others searched through crowded rooms for friends before leaving together. Laughter still drifted through the dimly lit interior, but the energy had begun to change. The excitement of the evening was giving way to the exhaustion that follows a long night. Outside, the cold November air settled over the streets of Jamaica, Queens. Parked cars reflected the orange glow of streetlights. The sidewalks were damp from the night's moisture. Traffic had become sparse. The city, which only hours earlier had pulsed with movement, now rested in that strange silence unique to the hours before sunrise. It was approximately 4 o'clock in the morning. Sean Bell stepped outside the nightclub with Joseph Guzman and Trent Benefield. To anyone watching from a distance, they looked like countless other young men leaving a nightclub after spending an evening with friends. There was no visible panic. No obvious confrontation. No dramatic argument spilling into the street. They simply walked toward Sean's silver Nissan Altima. For Sean, the destination was simple. Home. A few hours of sleep. Then the wedding. It was supposed to be one final drive before the most important day of his life. But they were not the only people watching. Scattered nearby were undercover NYPD officers assigned to monitor the nightclub. Unlike uniformed patrol officers, they blended into the crowd. No badges hung visibly from their necks. No marked police vehicles announced their presence. To everyone around them, they appeared to be ordinary civilians. That anonymity was intentional. It allowed them to observe suspected criminal activity without attracting attention. It also created the possibility that, if something unfolded quickly, the people they confronted might not immediately recognize them as law enforcement. Earlier in the night, Officer Jescard Isnora later reported overhearing what he believed was a disturbing conversation. According to his testimony, one of the men associated with Sean Bell allegedly suggested retrieving a gun. Those words instantly altered the officer's perception of the situation. Whether the statement had actually been made, misunderstood, taken out of context, or directed toward something entirely different has never been conclusively established. No audio recording existed. No independent witness confirmed hearing the same words. The entire chain of events that followed rested heavily upon one officer's interpretation of a conversation inside a noisy nightclub. From that moment forward, the officers believed they might be preventing an imminent shooting. Every movement by Sean and his friends was now filtered through that assumption. Psychologists often describe how expectation changes perception. When someone believes danger is approaching, ordinary actions can suddenly appear threatening. Looking over a shoulder becomes surveillance. Walking quickly becomes fleeing. Reaching into a pocket becomes reaching for a weapon. The human brain attempts to identify threats before they become fatal. Sometimes those instincts save lives. Sometimes they create catastrophic misunderstandings. As Sean entered the driver's seat of the Nissan Altima, nothing suggested that he believed he was surrounded by police officers. Joseph Guzman climbed into the front passenger seat. Trent Benefield entered the rear. The doors closed. The engine started. Inside the car, conversation likely continued in the casual way friends talk after a night out. Perhaps they laughed about something that had happened inside the club. Perhaps they discussed the wedding waiting only hours away. Perhaps they simply talked about getting home before sunrise. Those words disappeared forever. No recording captured them. No surviving witness remembered every sentence. Outside, however, the officers were moving. They had decided to intervene. Accounts differ sharply regarding precisely how the confrontation began. According to police testimony presented later in court, officers identified themselves as police and ordered Sean to stop the vehicle. Several officers stated they displayed badges and shouted commands. From their perspective, they were attempting to prevent armed suspects from escaping. Yet multiple civilian witnesses later described a scene filled with confusion. Plainclothes men rushed toward the vehicle. Shouting erupted almost instantly. Darkness limited visibility. People nearby struggled to understand exactly who was confronting whom. Some witnesses questioned whether the officers had clearly identified themselves before events spiraled out of control. That distinction would later become one of the central controversies of the case. Imagine those few seconds from Sean's perspective. It is still dark. You are sitting inside a parked vehicle. Suddenly several strangers begin moving rapidly toward you. Voices overlap. Adrenaline surges before understanding has time to catch up. Would you immediately recognize undercover officers? Would you believe you were facing armed criminals? Would panic shape your decisions before reason could intervene? Those questions remain impossible to answer with certainty. What happened next unfolded with astonishing speed. According to the officers, Sean accelerated the Nissan. Officer Isnora later testified that he believed the vehicle struck him. Other officers stated the car lurched forward, reversed, collided with another vehicle, and posed an immediate threat to their lives. Inside rapidly evolving confrontations, events often feel longer than they truly are. Seconds stretch. Perception narrows. Training competes with instinct. The officers believed they faced armed men attempting to escape. Sean may have believed unknown attackers surrounded his vehicle. Those two perceptions, whether accurate or mistaken, now occupied the same physical space. The Nissan moved. An officer shouted. Someone drew a firearm. Then the first shot shattered the morning. Witnesses later struggled to identify who fired first. What they consistently remembered was the overwhelming intensity that followed. One gunshot became several. Several became dozens. The sound echoed violently between nearby buildings. Residents sleeping inside apartments awoke in terror. Some believed rival gangs had exchanged fire. Others thought an automatic weapon had been used because the shots came so rapidly that individual reports blended together. Glass exploded outward from the Nissan. Windows disintegrated instantly. Metal panels buckled beneath repeated impacts. The confined interior of the vehicle became a deadly trap. Officer Michael Oliver continued firing. Again. And again. And again. When investigators later counted shell casings, they discovered Oliver alone had discharged 31 rounds. Officer Jescard Isnora fired 11 shots. Officer Mark Cooper fired 4. Additional shots came from other officers during the chaos. By the time the gunfire finally stopped, 50 bullets had been discharged. 50. It is a number so extraordinary that many people hearing it for the first time assume it must be an exaggeration. It was not. The barrage lasted only seconds. Yet its consequences would echo for decades. Inside the Nissan, Sean Bell had been struck multiple times. His body collapsed behind the steering wheel. The dream of becoming a husband only hours later vanished in an eruption of shattered glass and gunfire. Joseph Guzman suffered devastating injuries. Bullets tore through his body again and again. 19 separate gunshot wounds left him critically injured. The fact that he survived remains nothing short of remarkable. Doctors would later spend countless hours attempting to save his life. Trent Benefield was also wounded. Although his injuries proved less severe than Guzman's, the psychological trauma of surviving such overwhelming violence would remain long after physical wounds healed. Silence finally returned to the street. Smoke drifted through the cold air. The smell of burned gunpowder lingered over twisted metal and broken glass. Moments earlier, the area had been filled with anticipation, celebration, and ordinary conversation. Now it had become a crime scene. Officers approached the vehicle cautiously. Weapons remained drawn. Their training had taught them to expect further danger. If they truly believed armed suspects occupied the car, caution remained understandable. But as doors opened and bodies became visible, another realization slowly emerged. There were no weapons. No handgun lay on the seats. No firearm rested beneath the dashboard. No rifle had been hidden in the trunk. Investigators searched the vehicle thoroughly. Nothing. The men who had just absorbed 50 rounds were completely unarmed. That discovery would fundamentally reshape public understanding of the shooting. An operation officers believed had prevented armed violence now appeared to many observers as an overwhelming use of deadly force against men who possessed no weapons at all. Emergency medical personnel arrived quickly. Their efforts focused first on preserving life. Sean Bell, however, had suffered catastrophic injuries. Despite every attempt to save him, he was pronounced dead. He was 23 years old. His wedding was scheduled to begin only hours later. Elsewhere across Queens, family members remained asleep, unaware that their lives had already changed forever. Nicole still believed she would soon prepare for the happiest day of her life. Wedding guests expected celebration. Children slept peacefully without knowing they had lost their father. Phones had not yet begun ringing. Police officers had not yet delivered devastating news. Television crews had not yet arrived. The country had not yet learned Sean Bell's name. For a brief moment, two realities existed simultaneously. One family still believed a wedding would soon begin. Another group of investigators already stood beneath flashing emergency lights surrounding a bullet-riddled car. Between those two realities lay only time. And when dawn finally broke over Queens, the sunlight illuminated not a groom preparing for his ceremony, but one of the most controversial police shooting scenes America had witnessed in a generation. Daybreak arrived slowly over Jamaica, Queens. The first pale light of morning spread across rooftops and apartment windows, revealing a street that no longer resembled the ordinary neighborhood it had been only an hour earlier. The silver Nissan Altima remained motionless, its body scarred by dozens of bullet holes. Nearly every window had been shattered. Fragments of glass glittered across the pavement like frozen raindrops. The driver's side door was twisted open. Blood stained the seats, the steering wheel, the dashboard, and the pavement beneath the vehicle. Steam rose faintly from the engine into the cold November air. The silence that followed the gunfire felt unnatural. Only minutes before, the neighborhood had been awakened by what many residents later described as an endless barrage of explosions. Now the only sounds came from police radios, ambulance crews moving quickly between vehicles, and the distant hum of traffic beginning another ordinary Saturday morning. For the officers still standing at the scene, the adrenaline had not yet disappeared. Some remained convinced they had narrowly survived an encounter with armed suspects. Others had begun replaying the shooting inside their minds, trying to reconstruct every movement that had unfolded in a matter of seconds. Critical incidents rarely end when the shooting stops. For everyone involved, the mind immediately begins searching for answers. Did I see what I thought I saw? Did I react too slowly? Too quickly? Was there another choice? Those questions often arrive long before investigators do. Within minutes, supervisors from the New York Police Department began arriving. The area was sealed off. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across intersections. Uniformed officers redirected traffic away from the growing investigation. Curious residents gathered behind police lines, many still wearing jackets hastily thrown over pajamas after being awakened by the gunfire. No one fully understood what had happened. Rumors spread almost immediately. Some believed police had interrupted a gang shooting. Others assumed officers had exchanged fire with armed robbers. Several neighbors claimed they had heard what sounded like an automatic weapon. The sheer number of shots had made it difficult for anyone to believe they had all come from police-issued handguns. As detectives began documenting the scene, every inch of the street became evidence. Crime scene photographers carefully captured the position of the vehicle before anything was moved. They photographed shattered windows from multiple angles. They measured distances between shell casings. Each brass casing lying on the pavement represented a decision made in less than a second. Investigators counted them methodically. 1, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40. Eventually, the total reached 50 discharged rounds. Even veteran investigators paused at the number. Police shootings involving multiple rounds were not unheard of. But 50 shots fired at 3 men inside a single vehicle was extraordinary. Every casing would later be matched to the firearm that discharged it. That process would reveal a striking imbalance. Officer Michael Oliver had fired 31 rounds. More than half of all bullets came from a single weapon. Officer Jeskard Isnora had fired 11. Officer Mark Cooper had fired 4. Additional officers had also discharged their weapons during the confusion. Those figures would become central pieces of evidence in the months ahead. The Nissan itself quickly transformed into a silent witness. Ballistics experts examined every bullet strike. The windshield resembled a spiderweb of fractured safety glass. The driver's side had absorbed repeated impacts. Metal panels were punctured. Seats had been shredded. Blood patterns documented where each occupant had been sitting. Investigators would later spend countless hours reconstructing the trajectory of individual bullets, attempting to determine where everyone had been positioned when the shooting began. Inside the vehicle, another search quietly unfolded. Officers looked beneath the seats. Inside the glove compartment. Between cushions. In the trunk. Every compartment was examined. Every container opened. Every possible hiding place inspected. Nothing. No handgun. No shotgun. No rifle. No knife. No weapon of any kind. That discovery changed the emotional atmosphere surrounding the investigation almost immediately. If officers had believed they were confronting armed suspects, where was the weapon they expected to find? Had it been discarded? Hidden nearby? Investigators expanded the search beyond the vehicle. The surrounding sidewalks were combed carefully. Storm drains were inspected. Bushes were searched. Nearby lots were examined. Again, nothing. The absence of a firearm would become one of the defining facts of the entire case. Meanwhile, paramedics had already transported Joseph Guzman and Trent Benefield to nearby hospitals. Both men remained alive, though their conditions differed dramatically. Joseph's injuries were catastrophic. 19 bullets had entered his body. Doctors rushed him into emergency surgery almost immediately. Operating rooms became battlefields of another kind. Surgeons worked tirelessly to stop internal bleeding. Fragments of bullets were removed where possible. Damaged organs required immediate repair. Every passing minute mattered. Hospital staff later recalled the intensity surrounding his arrival. The number of wounds alone seemed almost impossible. Many patients do not survive even a fraction of such injuries. Yet somehow, Joseph continued fighting. Trent Benefield also received urgent medical treatment. His physical injuries, while serious, were not considered immediately fatal. The emotional wounds, however, would prove far more complicated. He had watched one of his closest friends die only feet away. He had survived an event almost beyond comprehension. Long after the visible injuries healed, memories of those moments would remain. Back at the crime scene, detectives began interviewing officers separately. This procedure followed standard protocol after police shootings. Investigators needed to preserve each officer's independent recollection before memories became influenced by conversations with others. Each officer described events from his own perspective. Each explained why deadly force had seemed necessary. The accounts shared common themes. They believed they had identified themselves as police. They believed Sean Bell attempted to drive toward them. They believed someone inside the vehicle possessed or intended to retrieve a firearm. They believed innocent lives, including their own, faced immediate danger. Whether those beliefs accurately reflected reality would become the central question of the investigation. Human memory under extreme stress is remarkably complex. Scientific research has repeatedly demonstrated that fear can narrow perception. People may accurately remember certain details while unintentionally misremembering others. Time itself often feels distorted. A 5-second event may feel like 30 seconds. Fast-moving actions appear slower. Peripheral details disappear entirely. Investigators understood these limitations. Still, every statement required careful examination. Not far away, another group of detectives began locating civilian witnesses. Several people had been outside the nightclub when the shooting occurred. Others had watched portions of the confrontation from nearby sidewalks. Residents peered from apartment windows after hearing shouting. Their recollections varied considerably. Some remembered hearing officers identify themselves. Others insisted they heard only confusion and yelling. Some believed the vehicle moved aggressively. Others described frantic, uncertain movements rather than an intentional attack. The inconsistencies did not necessarily indicate dishonesty. Traumatic events rarely produce identical memories. Every witness observes from a different angle. Every mind fills missing pieces differently. One person's certainty may conflict entirely with another's equally sincere recollection. As investigators gathered these statements, news of the shooting began spreading beyond Queens. Local police scanners first alerted journalists that officers had fired dozens of rounds during an overnight operation. Newsrooms quickly dispatched reporters. Helicopters appeared overhead. Camera crews established positions behind police barricades. At first, only limited information reached the public. A police-involved shooting. 1 man dead. 2 wounded. Possible confrontation outside a nightclub. But as additional facts emerged, the story rapidly grew larger. The victim had been unarmed. He was 23 years old. He had been scheduled to marry later that very day. Those details transformed public interest into national attention. Across the city, family members were receiving devastating news. No police notification can prepare loved ones for such loss. Officers assigned to death notifications carry one of the most emotionally difficult responsibilities in law enforcement. There are no perfect words. Only irreversible ones. Sean's family struggled to comprehend what they were hearing. There must be some mistake. Surely another Sean Bell had been involved. He had left only hours earlier for a bachelor party. The wedding was today. How could that possibly become a homicide investigation? Nicole's world collapsed almost instantly. The dress waiting for her no longer mattered. The ceremony no longer existed. Plans built over months disappeared in a single conversation. Instead of preparing her daughters for photographs and celebration, she faced a reality almost too painful to process. The man she expected to marry before sunset would never come home. Inside hospitals, doctors continued working to save Joseph Guzman while investigators waited anxiously for an opportunity to speak with him. His testimony, if he survived, could prove invaluable. He had occupied the front passenger seat throughout the shooting. He alone could describe what occurred inside the vehicle during those final moments before gunfire erupted. But medical treatment understandably took precedence. His survival remained uncertain. As the hours passed, forensic specialists completed increasingly detailed examinations. Bullet trajectories were mapped. Damage to surrounding vehicles documented. Every fragment of evidence carefully preserved. Nothing at the scene suggested officers had exchanged gunfire with armed suspects. Every discharged round recovered belonged to police weapons. That fact quietly altered the direction of the investigation. Instead of determining who fired first, investigators already knew the answer. The challenge now became understanding why 50 shots had been fired and whether the use of deadly force had been legally justified. By midday, the streets surrounding Kahlua Cabaret had largely reopened. Police tape disappeared. Tow trucks removed damaged vehicles. The visible signs of violence gradually faded. To passing motorists, the intersection once again resembled an ordinary city street. Yet beneath that appearance, the investigation had only begun. Evidence collected that morning would soon be examined by forensic experts, prosecutors, defense attorneys, independent analysts, journalists, and eventually a courtroom. Every shell casing. Every witness statement. Every bullet hole. Every second of testimony. Each would become part of an intensely scrutinized effort to answer one haunting question that still lingered over Queens as the sun climbed higher into the November sky. How had a groom on his way home from his bachelor party become the victim of 50 police bullets without a single weapon ever being found? The investigation began almost immediately, but from the very beginning it was unlike an ordinary homicide inquiry. In most murder cases, detectives search for the person responsible. In the death of Sean Bell, everyone already knew who had fired the shots. The identities of the officers had never been a mystery. Officer Michael Oliver. Officer Jessgard Isnora. Officer Mark Cooper. Their service weapons had been collected. Their statements had been recorded. The physical evidence linked every discharged round to police-issued firearms. The central question was not who had fired. It was whether those 50 shots had been legally justified. That distinction transformed the investigation into one of the most closely watched police inquiries New York had seen in years. Whenever law enforcement investigates its own officers, public confidence immediately becomes fragile. Supporters of the police worry that officers may be unfairly judged for split-second decisions made under extraordinary pressure. Critics fear that institutional loyalty may protect officers from accountability. Investigators therefore faced two equally difficult responsibilities. They had to uncover the truth. They also had to convince the public that the truth, whatever it proved to be, had not been influenced by politics, emotion, or professional loyalty. Within days, the New York Police Department launched an internal investigation while the Queens District Attorney's Office began reviewing possible criminal charges. Independent investigators interviewed witnesses again, often comparing new statements with those given during the chaotic hours immediately following the shooting. Small inconsistencies emerged. Some reflected ordinary failures of memory. Others raised more significant questions. One issue dominated nearly every interview. Had the officers clearly identified themselves as police? The answer mattered enormously. If Sean Bell genuinely believed armed criminals were rushing his vehicle, his reaction to accelerate or attempt escape might be interpreted very differently than if he knowingly ignored lawful police commands. Witnesses did not agree. Some believed they heard officers shout that they were police. Others insisted the confrontation happened so quickly that any announcement would have been impossible to recognize amid overlapping voices and confusion. Several people recalled hearing shouting but could not distinguish individual words. Darkness complicated every account. The incident had unfolded shortly before dawn. Streetlights illuminated portions of the roadway, but visibility remained limited. The officers wore plain clothes. Badges, according to testimony, were displayed. Whether those badges could be clearly recognized during a rapidly evolving confrontation remained another subject of disagreement. Investigators attempted to reconstruct every second. They examined surveillance footage from nearby locations. Unfortunately, no camera captured the entire shooting with sufficient clarity to answer every disputed question. Technology in 2006 differed dramatically from what exists today. Body cameras had not yet become standard equipment. Cell phone videos documenting police encounters were still relatively uncommon. The investigation therefore depended largely upon eyewitness testimony, forensic evidence, and officer statements. Each source carried strengths. Each carried limitations. The most controversial issue soon centered on the conversation reportedly overheard inside Kahlua Cabaret. Officer Jessgard Isnora maintained that he believed someone associated with Sean Bell had spoken about retrieving a gun. That statement fundamentally shaped every decision officers made afterward. If true, it offered context explaining why undercover officers believed they faced an imminent armed confrontation. Yet investigators encountered immediate difficulties. No recording existed. The nightclub's loud music made accurate hearing difficult. No independent witness confirmed hearing identical words. Several people who had been near Sean inside the club reported hearing nothing resembling a discussion about obtaining a firearm. Others simply could not remember. The alleged conversation therefore remained impossible to verify conclusively. Legal experts later described it as one of the most significant unresolved aspects of the entire case. If the officers genuinely believed violence was about to occur, their perception of danger becomes easier to understand. If that belief rested upon a misunderstanding, the entire chain of events appears dramatically different. The investigation could not determine with certainty which possibility reflected reality. Meanwhile, forensic specialists continued analyzing the vehicle. The Nissan Altima became the silent centerpiece of the investigation. Bullet trajectories were carefully measured. Investigators sought to determine the sequence of impacts. Some rounds entered through side windows. Others pierced the windshield. Several struck after the vehicle had already come to rest. Those findings fueled further debate. Critics questioned whether continued gunfire remained necessary once the vehicle had stopped moving. Supporters of the officers argued that rapidly unfolding encounters cannot be paused and analyzed 1 second at a time. Stress compresses decision-making into fractions of moments. Once officers begin responding to what they perceive as a deadly threat, stopping immediately may not always be psychologically possible. Scientific studies concerning lethal force encounters have repeatedly demonstrated that human reaction times continue even after perceived threats begin changing. This phenomenon would later become part of expert testimony examining why officers sometimes discharge multiple rounds. Still, 50 shots remained difficult for many observers to comprehend. Investigators next focused on Officer Michael Oliver's extraordinary volume of fire. 31 rounds. More than 60% of every shot fired came from his weapon alone. Oliver explained that he continued firing because he believed the threat remained active. According to his account, events unfolded so rapidly that he reacted continuously until the danger appeared over. Critics viewed the same evidence differently. They questioned whether 31 shots reflected reasonable force or a loss of control during an intensely stressful encounter. Neither interpretation could easily be dismissed. Psychological experts explained that officers experiencing extreme adrenaline often lose conscious awareness of how many rounds they discharge. Some later estimate firing only a few shots before learning they emptied nearly an entire magazine. Human perception under life-threatening stress rarely functions with perfect accuracy. The public, however, measured events through a different lens. Television broadcasts repeated one fact above all others. No weapon had been found. Every evening news program displayed photographs of Sean Bell beside images of the bullet-riddled Nissan. Newspapers printed diagrams illustrating 50 rounds striking 3 unarmed men. Public reaction intensified rapidly. Civil rights organizations demanded transparency. Community leaders called for independent oversight. Religious leaders urged calm while simultaneously expressing outrage. Outside police headquarters and government buildings, demonstrations began growing larger each day. Many protesters carried photographs of Sean. Others held signs displaying only a number. 50. No further explanation seemed necessary. Across New York, conversations extended far beyond the details of one shooting. People debated broader issues of policing, race, public safety, and accountability. Some argued that officers confronting potentially armed suspects deserve the benefit of reasonable doubt. Others insisted that the absence of weapons fundamentally undermined claims that deadly force had been unavoidable. Families gathered around dinner tables discussing the case. Co-workers debated it during lunch breaks. Radio talk shows devoted entire programs to competing interpretations. The investigation had evolved into something larger than criminal procedure. It became a mirror reflecting long-standing divisions within American society. For Sean Bell's family, however, those political debates often felt painfully distant. While television commentators analyzed tactics and legal standards, they continued mourning a son, fiancé, father, and friend. Funeral preparations replaced wedding plans. The emotional contrast proved almost unbearable. Only days earlier, relatives had selected formal clothing for a joyful ceremony. Now they selected clothing for burial. The church prepared for an entirely different gathering. Flowers originally intended to celebrate a marriage instead surrounded a coffin. Thousands attended Sean's funeral. Mourners filled pews far beyond seating capacity. Many had never met him personally. They came because they believed his death represented something larger than one family's tragedy. Speakers remembered Sean not as a political symbol but as a young father whose life had ended before reaching its promise. His daughters remained too young to fully understand the permanence surrounding them. Children experience grief differently from adults. They ask simple questions expecting simple answers. Where is Daddy? When is he coming home? Those questions often become the most painful for surviving families because no explanation feels adequate. As investigators continued gathering evidence, another important witness slowly recovered inside the hospital. Joseph Guzman had survived 19 gunshot wounds. His recovery astonished many medical professionals. The physical rehabilitation alone would require extraordinary determination. Yet investigators also recognized that Joseph possessed a uniquely important perspective. He had been seated beside Sean throughout the confrontation. Unlike outside witnesses who observed only fragments, Joseph experienced the entire encounter from inside the vehicle. When his medical condition finally allowed questioning, his recollections differed in important ways from those offered by officers. His account would later become one of the most closely scrutinized pieces of testimony in the entire investigation. The differences between those narratives highlighted the central challenge confronting prosecutors. Two groups of people had survived the same event. They sincerely remembered it differently. Physical evidence could resolve certain disputes. It confirmed the number of shots. It confirmed the absence of weapons. It documented bullet trajectories. But it could not reveal what each participant genuinely believed during those chaotic seconds before the first trigger was pulled. As weeks passed, investigators compiled thousands of pages of reports. Experts reviewed forensic findings. Attorneys prepared legal strategies. Grand jury proceedings approached. The pressure surrounding the case intensified with every passing day. New York had witnessed controversial police shootings before. Many wondered whether this investigation would finally produce criminal accountability or whether it would follow the familiar path of public outrage followed by legal exoneration. The answer remained uncertain. But one reality had already become impossible to ignore. The investigation was no longer examining only the final moments outside the Kahlua Cabaret. It was examining the entire system that had allowed those final moments to unfold. For weeks, the investigation appeared to move in slow circles. Every new interview seemed to raise another question instead of answering an old one. Every witness added another layer of uncertainty. Every television broadcast ended with the same unanswered mystery. Why had 50 bullets been fired? Public frustration continued to grow. Outside police headquarters, demonstrators gathered with candles and photographs of Sean Bell. Community organizations demanded transparency. Civil rights leaders called for accountability. Police unions responded by reminding the public that officers often make life or death decisions in only fractions of a second. New York found itself divided. For some, the officers had survived an encounter they genuinely believed would end in gunfire. For others, an unarmed groom had been killed on the morning of his wedding because fear had replaced judgment. The investigation entered its next and most important phase when prosecutors presented evidence to a grand jury. Unlike a trial jury, a grand jury does not determine guilt. Its responsibility is narrower. It decides whether enough evidence exists to bring criminal charges. The proceedings unfolded behind closed doors. Witnesses entered quietly. Attorneys carried boxes filled with reports, diagrams, photographs, and forensic analyses. Every piece of evidence collected during the previous weeks was carefully reviewed. The shell casings. The ballistic reports. Medical examinations. Officer interviews. Civilian testimony. Forensic reconstructions. Investigators understood that every detail mattered. One overlooked inconsistency could change the direction of the entire case. One witness could alter the legal landscape. One decision inside that grand jury room would determine whether the officers would eventually stand trial. Among the most significant evidence were the forensic findings surrounding the Nissan Altima. Ballistics experts reconstructed the positions of the officers and the vehicle as accurately as possible. Every bullet hole became part of a larger puzzle. Each trajectory told a small part of the story. Some rounds entered from the driver's side. Others shattered the windshield. Several struck after earlier bullets had already disabled portions of the vehicle. Experts attempted to determine exactly when the Nissan had moved, when it stopped, and whether officers continued firing after the immediate danger had passed. Unfortunately, forensic science could answer only part of those questions. Bullets reveal direction. They reveal impact. They cannot reveal fear. Nor can they measure perception. Another major focus centered on Officer Michael Oliver. His 31 shots became impossible to ignore. Investigators asked him to explain, in detail, why he continued firing long after many other officers had stopped. Oliver maintained that events unfolded so rapidly he believed the threat remained active throughout the encounter. He later described reacting instinctively rather than consciously counting each round discharged from his weapon. Experts familiar with police shootings acknowledged that officers frequently experience auditory exclusion, tunnel vision, and distorted perceptions of time during lethal force incidents. Many cannot accurately estimate how many rounds they have fired. The human brain under extreme stress often prioritizes survival over conscious awareness. Still, prosecutors faced an important question. Even accepting those psychological realities, did the totality of the officer's actions cross the line into criminal recklessness? That question became the foundation of the legal case. Meanwhile, Joseph Guzman slowly regained enough strength to describe the shooting from inside the vehicle. His testimony differed sharply from that of the officers. According to Guzman, confusion overwhelmed everything. He maintained that the men approaching the car were not clearly recognizable as police officers. The situation escalated almost instantly. He described panic, chaos, gunfire erupting before anyone inside the vehicle fully understood what was happening. His recollection reinforced what several civilian witnesses had already suggested. The confrontation may have unfolded too quickly for clear communication. Trent Benefield offered additional insight after recovering from his injuries. Although his memory of certain moments remained affected by trauma, portions of his account also challenged elements of the police narrative. Together, the surviving passengers became the only voices capable of describing the experience from inside the Nissan. Their testimony did not automatically establish criminal wrongdoing. It did, however, deepen questions surrounding the officers' perception of events. As prosecutors compared every statement, they discovered another challenge familiar to investigators in many traumatic incidents. No two accounts matched perfectly. Not even among the officers. Small differences appeared regarding timing, vehicle movement, verbal commands, exact positioning. Such inconsistencies are common after highly stressful events. Human memory does not function like a video recording. People remember fragments. Emotion fills gaps. Perspective shapes recollection. The existence of differing memories alone does not necessarily indicate deception. Yet prosecutors needed to determine whether those differences reflected ordinary human limitations or something more significant. Outside the legal process, media attention intensified further. National newspapers devoted front-page coverage to the case. Television programs replayed animations reconstructing the shooting. Legal analysts debated possible criminal charges. Former police commanders defended the complexity of split-second decisions. Civil rights advocates questioned why unarmed men had been met with overwhelming deadly force. The phrase 50 shots became part of America's vocabulary. It no longer described merely the number of bullets fired. It became shorthand for an entire national debate. As public pressure mounted, the Queen's District Attorney's Office continued reviewing every available piece of evidence. The legal standard for criminal prosecution remained extraordinarily high. It was not enough to demonstrate that mistakes may have occurred. Prosecutors needed evidence capable of proving beyond a reasonable doubt that the officer's conduct violated criminal law. Police officers occupy a unique legal position regarding the use of force. The law recognizes that officers sometimes must make immediate decisions under dangerous circumstances. The central legal question therefore focused not on whether the outcome proved tragic. Everyone agreed it had. Instead, prosecutors examined whether the officer's belief that deadly force was necessary had been objectively reasonable under the circumstances as they perceived them. That distinction would become critical throughout the case. After months of investigation, prosecutors reached a decision. In March 2007, a Queen's grand jury voted to indict 3 officers. Officer Michael Oliver faced charges including first-degree and second-degree manslaughter, along with reckless endangerment. Officer Jeskard Isnora was charged with manslaughter and reckless endangerment. Officer Mark Cooper faced reckless endangerment charges. The announcement immediately captured national attention. Police officers are rarely criminally charged for on-duty shootings. The indictments therefore represented a remarkable development. For Sean Bell's family, the decision offered neither celebration nor closure. No indictment could restore a life. No criminal proceeding could allow Sean to walk through the church doors on the wedding day he never reached. Still, the charges signaled that prosecutors believed serious legal questions deserved examination in open court. Supporters of the Bell family viewed the indictments as an important step toward accountability. Police organizations reacted differently. Many officers expressed concern that criminal prosecution might discourage proactive policing. Some feared officers would hesitate during future life-threatening encounters, worried more about courtroom consequences than immediate survival. The divide between those perspectives reflected larger tensions extending far beyond New York City. The legal battle now entered an entirely new phase. Defense attorneys immediately began preparing for trial. Experienced criminal defense lawyers carefully analyzed every witness statement, every forensic report, and every procedural decision made during the investigation. Their strategy centered upon one fundamental argument. The officers genuinely believed they faced an imminent deadly threat. Whether that belief ultimately proved mistaken, they argued, did not necessarily make it criminal. Prosecutors prepared an equally demanding case. They would attempt to demonstrate that the officer's perception of danger, and especially the volume of force used, had exceeded the boundaries established by law. Both sides understood the difficulty ahead. Unlike many criminal cases, this one contained no dispute regarding who fired the fatal shots. Instead, the courtroom would become the place where competing perceptions of reality collided. Fear versus restraint. Split-second judgment versus excessive force. Reasonable belief versus tragic mistake. As the months passed and trial preparations accelerated, Sean Bell's name continued appearing across newspapers, television broadcasts, academic discussions, and community meetings. His story had grown far beyond one street in Queens. It had become a defining examination of how justice should evaluate deadly decisions made in seconds but debated for years. The courtroom doors had not yet opened. Witnesses had not yet taken the stand. The judge had not yet heard the evidence. But one thing had already become unmistakably clear. Whatever verdict eventually emerged, this case would shape the national conversation about police accountability for generations to come. The courtroom was silent long before the first witness spoke. Outside the courthouse, television cameras had already claimed every available sidewalk. Reporters stood shoulder to shoulder beneath rows of satellite trucks, rehearsing live broadcasts that would soon reach millions of viewers across the country. Protesters gathered behind metal barricades holding photographs of Sean Bell, while police officers assigned to courthouse security watched the growing crowds with quiet professionalism. Inside, however, the atmosphere felt entirely different. There were no chants. No camera flashes. Only polished wooden benches, neatly arranged evidence files, and the weight of a decision that everyone understood would extend far beyond a single courtroom. The criminal trial began in early 2008. Unlike many high-profile criminal cases, there would be no jury. The defendants had chosen a bench trial, meaning the verdict would rest entirely in the hands of one man. Judge Arthur Cooperman. His responsibility was immense. He would not decide whether the shooting had been tragic. That much was beyond dispute. He would decide whether prosecutors had proven beyond a reasonable doubt that the officers had committed criminal acts under New York law. It is one of the highest legal standards in the American justice system. Suspicion is not enough. Probability is not enough. Even strong belief is not enough. The evidence must eliminate reasonable doubt regarding criminal guilt. That burden rested entirely upon the prosecution. For Sean Bell's family, every day inside the courtroom reopened wounds that had barely begun to heal. Nicole sat only a short distance from the officers whose actions had forever altered her life. The man she had expected to marry had become the subject of forensic diagrams, ballistic reports, and legal arguments. Instead of hearing wedding vows, she listened to attorneys debate bullet trajectories. Instead of planning anniversaries, she watched lawyers examine photographs of the vehicle where Sean had died. Grief inside a courtroom is unlike grief anywhere else. Loss becomes evidence. Love becomes testimony. Memories become exhibits. The prosecution began by reconstructing the final minutes outside the Kahlua Cabaret. Witnesses described the confusion that erupted in the darkness. Civilian observers recalled hearing shouting but struggling to understand who was giving orders. Several testified that everything happened so quickly they barely recognized what was unfolding before the gunfire began. The prosecution argued that the officers escalated the confrontation unnecessarily. They emphasized one undeniable fact. Sean Bell and his friends had been completely unarmed. No firearm had been recovered from the vehicle. No weapon had been found on any of the three men. Investigators had searched the surrounding area extensively. Nothing. Prosecutors repeatedly returned to that reality. If no weapons existed, why had officers continued firing until 50 rounds had been discharged? Medical experts followed. Doctors explained the injuries suffered by Sean Bell. Photographs too graphic for public release were examined privately inside the courtroom. Every wound documented the devastating consequences of those few chaotic seconds. The testimony remained clinical, precise, detached. Yet beneath the medical language lay an unmistakable human tragedy. Joseph Guzman's injuries received similar attention. Surviving 19 gunshot wounds required extraordinary medical intervention. Surgeons described multiple emergency procedures performed to save his life. Months of recovery followed. Even after leaving the hospital, the physical and emotional consequences remained. The prosecution presented Joseph not only as a survivor but as someone who had experienced the shooting from inside the vehicle. When Joseph Guzman finally took the witness stand, the courtroom grew noticeably quieter. He described leaving the nightclub with Sean Bell and Trent Benefield. He recalled entering the Nissan believing the evening had ended. According to his testimony, confusion overtook everything almost immediately. He maintained that he never understood who was approaching the vehicle before the shooting began. His recollection supported the prosecution's argument that the officers had failed to communicate clearly enough during an encounter that unfolded in only seconds. Cross-examination quickly followed. Defense attorneys questioned every detail. Memory under trauma, they argued, is imperfect. Someone experiencing extreme fear may unintentionally misunderstand events. Joseph remained firm on many aspects of his account, while acknowledging that some moments had passed too quickly to reconstruct perfectly. That honesty carried its own weight. Few witnesses emerging from such traumatic experiences remember every second with complete clarity. The defense then shifted the focus dramatically. Rather than emphasizing what investigators later discovered, they concentrated on what the officers believed during those critical moments. Officer testimony formed the foundation of that strategy. The officers described conducting an undercover operation at a nightclub already associated with violent crime, illegal firearms, and narcotics activity. They explained hearing what they believed was a discussion about retrieving a gun. From their perspective, The threat of imminent violence had become real long before Sean Bell entered his vehicle. Defense attorneys reminded the court that police officers must make decisions based on information available at that exact moment, not with the benefit of hindsight. That distinction became the heart of the case. Today everyone knows there was no weapon. The officers did not possess that certainty when events unfolded. The defense argued that they reacted to what they honestly perceived rather than to facts discovered afterward. Officer Michael Oliver eventually testified about his own decisions. He explained believing the Nissan posed an immediate deadly threat. According to his account, the vehicle accelerated toward officers, creating fear that someone would be killed either by gunfire or by the moving automobile itself. When asked why he fired 31 rounds, Oliver described continuing to respond because he believed the threat had not ended. The number itself, he suggested, reflected neither anger nor vengeance. It reflected an intense survival response unfolding within seconds. The prosecution challenged that explanation. Attorneys questioned whether a reasonable officer should have recognized sooner that the danger had diminished. Could 31 shots truly be justified? Had officers continued firing after Sean Bell no longer posed a threat? Those questions echoed repeatedly throughout the trial. Ballistics experts offered detailed testimony regarding bullet trajectories. Large diagrams filled courtroom displays. Laser measurements reconstructed likely positions. Yet even sophisticated forensic science could not answer every disputed issue. Physical evidence established where bullets traveled. It could not establish precisely what every participant believed while those bullets were being fired. Psychological experts explained how officers involved in life-threatening incidents often experience tunnel vision, distorted hearing, and altered perceptions of time. Stress hormones can dramatically affect awareness. Individuals sometimes continue reacting even after circumstances begin changing because the brain processes danger slightly more slowly than events unfold. Those scientific explanations did not excuse the shooting. Nor did they automatically establish criminal responsibility. They simply illustrated the complexity of evaluating split-second decisions from the safety of a courtroom months later. Throughout the proceedings, Judge Cooperman remained largely expressionless. He listened carefully. He occasionally asked clarifying questions. Thousands of pages of testimony accumulated. Every witness contributed another piece to an already complicated puzzle. Outside, public demonstrations continued. Supporters of Sean Bell called for convictions. Police organizations urged respect for officers forced into impossible circumstances. News commentators debated testimony each evening. Legal scholars published analyses before the trial had even concluded. By the time closing arguments arrived, both sides understood the extraordinary significance of the verdict. The prosecution argued that the officer's conduct crossed the boundary separating tragic mistake from criminal recklessness. The defense responded that tragedy alone cannot satisfy the legal burden required for conviction. The law demanded proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Without that certainty, acquittal remained legally required regardless of the emotional consequences. On April 25, 2008, the courtroom filled once again. Families returned. Reporters waited. The defendants sat quietly beside their attorneys. Sean Bell's loved ones prepared themselves for whatever came next. Judge Cooperman began reading his decision. The courtroom remained almost completely silent. After reviewing the evidence, the judge concluded that prosecutors had failed to prove the criminal charges beyond a reasonable doubt. He acknowledged inconsistencies and unanswered questions. He recognized the tragic outcome. But under the legal standard governing criminal convictions, he found the evidence insufficient. Officer Michael Oliver was acquitted. Officer Jeskard Isnora was acquitted. Officer Mark Cooper was acquitted. No criminal convictions followed the shooting. For a brief moment, almost no one moved. The words hung heavily inside the courtroom. Then emotion erupted. Sean Bell's family struggled to absorb the decision. Supporters expressed disbelief. Some wept openly. Others sat in stunned silence. Outside the courthouse, News spread within minutes. Demonstrators reacted with anger and heartbreak. Community leaders called for peaceful protests while expressing profound disappointment. Police organizations welcomed the verdict, maintaining that the officers had acted under circumstances they reasonably believed threatened their lives. The legal case had ended. The public debate had not. In many ways, it was only beginning. The acquittals did not erase 50 gunshots. They did not restore Sean Bell to his daughters. They did not answer every question surrounding those final moments outside the Kahlua Cabaret. Instead, the verdict marked the beginning of a larger national conversation about race, policing, accountability, fear, and justice, one that would continue long after the courtroom lights were turned off and the case itself officially came to a close. The verdict ended the criminal trial. It did not end the grief. It did not end the questions. And it certainly did not end the story of Sean Bell. Outside the courthouse, emotions that had been restrained throughout weeks of testimony finally spilled into the streets. Television cameras captured faces filled with disbelief, frustration, sorrow, and anger. Some people stood in silence, unable to process what they had just heard. Others embraced one another, tears running freely as reporters crowded around them with microphones. A verdict of not guilty carries a particular kind of finality. It does not declare that tragedy never occurred. It does not proclaim that every decision made was perfect. It simply means the prosecution failed to prove criminal guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. For the legal system, that distinction is fundamental. For grieving families, it often offers very little comfort. Nicole Paultray Bell walked out of the courthouse carrying far more than disappointment. She carried the realization that no criminal conviction would ever acknowledge the loss that had shattered her family. Less than 2 years earlier, she had expected to leave a church as a newly married woman. Now she left a courthouse as someone still searching for answers. The emotional weight of that journey is difficult to measure. Grief rarely follows legal timelines. Court dates appear on calendars. Heartbreak does not. Every anniversary returned memories that no verdict could erase. The date of the shooting. The wedding day that never happened. Birthdays. Holidays. Family gatherings where one chair remained permanently empty. Those moments often hurt more than public ceremonies because they unfold quietly, beyond television cameras and newspaper headlines. For Sean's daughters, life continued without the father they were too young to fully remember. Children process loss differently as they grow. Questions evolve with age. A toddler asks where daddy has gone. A school-aged child wonders why other classmates have fathers attending school events. A teenager begins reading newspaper articles and court records, trying to understand a person remembered more through photographs than lived experiences. Their grief matured alongside them. Each birthday brought another reminder of milestones Sean would never witness. First days of school. Graduation ceremonies. Learning to drive. Future weddings. Every father-daughter memory that should have existed now survived only in imagination. Sean's parents faced another painful reality familiar to many families who lose adult children. Parents naturally expect their children to outlive them. When that order is reversed, life never feels entirely normal again. Simple routines become emotional. Walking past Sean's old room. Finding family photographs. Hearing one of his favorite songs unexpectedly while driving. Grief has a remarkable ability to appear without warning. It hides inside ordinary moments. A familiar laugh heard in someone else's voice. A scent that recalls childhood. A holiday tradition once shared together. Those quiet reminders often become more painful than public remembrance ceremonies because they belong entirely to the family. Meanwhile, the officers involved attempted to rebuild lives forever changed by the shooting. Although acquitted, they remained permanently associated with one of the most controversial police shootings in New York history. Their names appeared in books, documentaries, newspaper archives, and academic research. Supporters viewed them as officers who had survived an impossible situation only to endure years of public scrutiny. Critics viewed them as symbols of a justice system unwilling to hold police criminally accountable. Regardless of perspective, none of the officers escaped the lasting consequences of that November morning. Their careers, reputations, and personal lives had been altered forever. The acquittals also intensified conversations occurring far beyond New York City. Across the United States, community meetings addressed issues of police accountability with renewed urgency. Civil rights organizations argued that the criminal justice system placed nearly impossible burdens upon prosecutors seeking convictions against law enforcement officers. Police leaders responded that officers should not face criminal punishment for honest mistakes made during rapidly evolving life-threatening encounters. Both arguments found supporters. Both reflected genuine concerns. The divide between them revealed how differently Americans often viewed policing depending upon personal experience. For many residents of minority communities, Sean Bell's death reinforced long-standing fears regarding excessive force. Parents again found themselves repeating conversations they had hoped future generations might never need. If police stop you, remain calm. Keep your hands visible. Do not argue. Move slowly. Those instructions were offered not because parents distrusted their children, but because they feared unpredictable encounters where misunderstandings might escalate. Elsewhere, police officers discussed the case within their own departments. Training instructors reviewed the shooting. Command staff examined tactical decisions. Many officers privately wondered what they themselves might have done under similar circumstances. Could anyone truly know until facing the same level of perceived danger? That uncertainty unsettled many within law enforcement. Nobody enters policing hoping to become the subject of national controversy. Yet the profession sometimes places ordinary people inside extraordinary situations where every decision may later be examined frame by frame in courtrooms and on television. The Bell case therefore became more than a legal precedent. It became a teaching tool. Police academies discussed it. Law schools analyzed it. Psychologists studying decision-making under stress referenced it. Criminal justice professors assigned it to students exploring the complex relationship between perception, force, and accountability. The story refused to disappear because it raised questions without easy answers. Can sincere fear still produce unnecessary violence? Can tragic mistakes exist without criminal intent? How should society evaluate split-second decisions whose consequences last forever? No courtroom can fully answer philosophical questions such as these. The criminal trial concluded according to legal standards. Public reflection continued according to moral ones. While those broader debates unfolded, another legal path remained open. Unlike criminal proceedings, civil lawsuits require a different burden of proof. Instead of establishing guilt beyond a reasonable doubt, civil cases generally ask whether responsibility is more likely than not. Sean Bell's family chose to pursue that path. The decision reflected something deeper than financial compensation. No amount of money could replace a father. No settlement could create new memories. No legal agreement could allow Nicole to relive the wedding day that had been stolen from her. The civil process instead offered another opportunity to examine what had happened and to seek institutional accountability through different legal standards. As attorneys prepared those proceedings, public attention gradually shifted toward newer headlines. Another election. Another international crisis. Another criminal investigation elsewhere. News cycles moved forward as they always do. Families do not. For the Bell family, the story remained permanently present. Every interview reopened old wounds. Every anniversary invited renewed media attention. Every new police shooting reported somewhere else in America often brought Sean's name back into national discussion. His story became connected to a larger narrative unfolding across decades. One case leading into another. One family mourning beside another. One community searching for trust after another. Years later, names such as Eric Garner, Michael Brown, Freddie Gray, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd, and many others would dominate national conversations about policing and race. Each tragedy carried unique circumstances. Each required independent examination. Yet journalists, scholars, and activists frequently looked backward to Sean Bell. Not because every case was identical. They were not. But because his death had become one of the defining moments shaping modern discussions about police use of deadly force. His legacy therefore extended beyond his own life. It influenced conversations about training, accountability, and community trust that continued long after 2006. Still, perhaps the most heartbreaking aspect of Sean Bell's story has nothing to do with courtrooms, legal standards, or political debate. It is the quiet recognition of everything that never happened. He never stood waiting at the end of the aisle as Nicole walked toward him. He never slipped a wedding ring onto her finger. He never danced with his bride during a wedding reception surrounded by family and friends. He never tucked his daughters into bed that night or told them stories about the celebration they were too young to remember. Those moments disappeared before they ever had the chance to exist. History remembers Sean Bell because of 50 gunshots fired before sunrise. His family remembers him for reasons that have nothing to do with headlines. A father's smile. A fiancé's embrace. A son's laughter. A friend's loyalty. Those memories survived even when legal proceedings ended. Perhaps that is the greatest lesson left behind by this case. Court verdicts determine legal responsibility. They cannot define the value of a human life. That responsibility belongs to those who continue remembering not only how Sean Bell died, but how he lived and why the future waiting for him on that November morning remains one of the most heartbreaking futures America never had the chance to witness.